Alright, ladies and gents, got a new project here from a customer, and I'm pretty excited about this one. You don't see a whole lot of these around these days. This is a Micromag. I believe, based on what I found online, it's a what they call a Generation 2 or Generation 2.5. The 2 having the straight cut here, and then the removable ball detent. Later on in Gen 3, these were actually machined right into the body and they could not be removed. And I think it was Gen 4 when they added a little angled bit up here. So I believe this is what makes it a 2.5 and not just a plain 2 is the anodizing. The 2 was just available in black, I believe. So really cool piece. This one has some interesting war wounds. So the anodizing is actually in pretty good shape. It does need a good cleaning. Let's see if I can focus here. You can see just lots of built up gunk. But one interesting thing is some kind of makeshift repair here on the top. I'm not quite sure, I haven't dug into it yet, why that was necessary. Normally the feed neck is held onto the body with this screw down here, I believe. Yeah, and then it slides out in sort of a dovetail mount. So we'll see what's going on with that. And then also I noticed that the trigger pin is bent. It's kind of hard to see here, but this is really wonky here. It does still kind of work, just looks bad. This does come with the this is like a remote line adapter. And an interesting fact, I did get this to gas up and it only leaked a little bit from back here, and it does cycle, but someone thought it was a good idea to put Teflon tape on the ASA threads for this, which obviously does not do anything. Always best to replace the O-ring instead, folks. Don't put Teflon tape on an ASA. That is your public service announcement for the day. Anyway, I'm really excited to work on this one and get it cleaned up and rebuilt. Probably a lot of the O-rings inside the valve are going to need to be replaced because it hasn't been touched in quite a while. It does have this cool hard line on it though. Might be original, I'm not sure. But yeah, stay tuned, we'll see how this turns out. Alright friends, so I wanted to do an update video here about halfway through this project. In the previous video I mentioned wanting to replace all the O-rings in the valve and taking a look at a few issues here. So the valve rebuild was actually super easy. All of the typical O-rings in there were dried out, including the valve body, the big huge O-ring that goes between the two valve halves here. That was completely dried out and cracked. So I replaced that, all the other key O-rings in there, and I've got it lubed up and it's shooting great with no leaks, and I will do a shooting dry fire at the end of this just to show you how that looks. But I wanted to follow up on a couple of things I mentioned in the first portion. As I suspected, this repair here that I mentioned in the first video, the reason that's necessary is that this screw is actually stripped out in the body, which means this can't properly hold the feed neck on. And so it looks like someone just took matters into their own hands and you know, tapped a couple holes here and here and then put that little metal brace on like this. And it does work, and so I'm just going to put that back on since the holes are already there. There's really no good way to fix that otherwise, because the hole in the body that this threads into is so tiny and it's so close to the edge of the body edge there that there's really no good way to fix it, unfortunately. So the other thing I mentioned was the safety pit post. So when I first got this, the safety, let's see if I can get a good angle here. It seemed like this was loose or bent or something. There's actually just a small, tiny set screw in the shaft of this safety post. And I backed that out a little ways so that it kind of stabilizes this. It's still a little bit loose, but I couldn't back it out any farther, otherwise it would the screw would just fall out. So I'm just going to call that good. It does work, and it's a lot less wonky than it was before. So the last challenge I'm facing though is actually the ball detent. I mentioned in the first video that later Micromags have the ball detent actually milled into the body itself, and now I can see why. Because when this is installed, you can see the two screws that go here. Well, they thread into, it's really hard to see here, it is probably only 1 millimeter, that's about as good as it's going to get, 1 millimeter of aluminum. And even here in this video, you can kind of see how that first hole is slightly bigger than this one, and that's because it's stripped out. This one might be okay, and this was holding when I first got it. This was actually staying on, and it wasn't like just falling off. But in order to get this to stay on, I'm gonna have to come up with some kind of option for that. So stay tuned for that. Also, finally, I haven't taken this apart yet, but you can see how even after cleaning, this arm is still really sticky, and so I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with that. It's probably just this post in there. That little tiny pin probably got rusty, so gonna have to take that pin out and clean it up, get the rust off, and then put it back together. So that's where we are at. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now, but stay tuned and I'll get this one buttoned up. Okay, I think we've got this one all finished up. So I did take care of the issues with the ball detent. I think before I mentioned there's a little tiny roll pin here that you have to drive out, and that was super rusty. So I drove it out using a punch, a little punch like this, which I happen to have the right size for. Just very carefully hit it with the hammer until it came out. It is plastic, so you just got to be careful that you don't, crack it or anything. So I cleaned that pin up, and now you can see it's nice and smooth, nice and springy. The spring actually wasn't rusty at all. It must be a stainless steel spring. So I did put a couple new stainless steel screws in here that I had to cut to just the right length so they don't intrude into the body where the bolt is moving. And those are actually, this one's holding, and this one is basically just keeping it from spinning. I don't know if it's actually grabbing into the body, but it does grab into the plastic here. This will probably be fine as long as the owner doesn't take a really nasty, if it doesn't scrape it against a bunker or take a really hard hit there or something. I think it'll be okay. But in the future, probably the only way to fix this would be, I don't know, maybe retap these holes for like slightly larger screws, which would probably be pretty big. They'd be 832 threads, so it wouldn't be the best looking mod, but it would work probably. I do have it gassed up right now. You can hear there's no leaks, and we'll just fire a few shots here. I do still need to chronograph it quick, but it is cycling nicely, and I think I am pretty much done with this thing. So it's kind of a fun project, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out.